Season 2, Episode 4, Breaking Out of the Structure. Hello and welcome to How to Survive Until You're Published, the podcast. Because if you're drowning in words, then so are we, and you might as well not do it alone.
So today we're going to be focusing on challenging and we're calling it breaking various plotting structures, but it's kind of like looking at them in new ways, including Amy's plotting structure, and just kind of look at some different approaches in general, primarily with hers and Save the Cat, and just some ways I was using plotting last season that now don't seem to work for me. Because we will dive in. I am a plotter. Pantsing scares me a lot. And for those of you who can pants, props to you. I mean, not saying I don't pants scenes and things. Yeah. I obviously do, but if I don't have to, then I'm more comfortable.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd be like I don't know if I could ever be a full-on pantser.
I don't know how people do that if you have no plot whatsoever. I guess you have more edits to make. But I would say that sometimes how much I want to be a plotter and how much of a plotter I am hinders me. I'm a very type A personality. Everything has to have its spot. I personally struggle like anxiety-wise if things don't go according to plan, and so that is something I've had to cope with, and I've noticed it's something in my writing too, where like
everything's got to have an order.
It does, yeah. And sometimes it hinders because it means I spend months drafting, revising my plot and story without even diving into writing. You hear about all the like years crafting their perfect worlds. I'll spend years crafting a plot because normally my ideas come from a plot. I'm going to like asterisk this. I do believe in character-driven novels, and I want all mine to be character-driven. Yeah. But I usually start with a plot, and so then it does mean I have to do a little bit more work on the back end to find the character and really like bring them out to fulfill the plot. Yeah. But I do think this kind of fits with me wanting to write more horror, and there's a lot of times thrillers and horror books are more plot-driven. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it doesn't mean if you're writing in these genres, you get away without compelling characters because people don't want to read about boring people. Yep. Well, just, flat characters. Yeah. But yeah, we'll start with debunking Amy's. Woo-hoo! So Amy, if you could summarize your plotting structure from last episode.
Okay, so just super quick. It's basically a spreadsheet with different plot lines along the columns and then your timeline on the rows. This allows for small details that often get missed when you're writing out your book so that you can make sure they're all accounted for.
Yep, and these columns include like emotional plot lines, the romance subplots to correspond with that, and just like
other subplots. Yeah.
The physical plot journey of your characters, things like that.
Your villains.
Yeah, your A story, your B story. Yeah. I did kind of briefly touch on this in our last episode, but if you didn't listen to it, or you want to listen to us ramble again, I did really like it. Like I said, I ended up using it for a previous work in progress to figure out the genre shift in it, and I did love it, especially the timeline, because I am very guilty of forgetting subplots, and I like to include mystery in my...
Ooh, and mysteries.
Yes.
You gotta map out mysteries.
You do. If you want your red herrings, you want those little details. Yeah, it can get messy very quickly. Yeah. So I did love it for that. It helps it stay organized. But I think you do really need to know your story or your characters. Yeah. And it does require you to put in a lot of work, which you should be putting in that much work anyways. Yeah. But I would struggle up front, I think, because I start with my plot. But that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It definitely... It can help, and it takes a lot of work, but it's all a lot of work in one place, and that can kind of help too, just keep it all together in one spot. So
but overall I think it's a pretty solid plotting process.
Sweet.
So then moving on to our other plots, Save the Cat and Hero's Journey. I kind of wanted to talk about approaching these and breaking these, because I was basically using Save the Cat and Hero's Journey like a Bible, where like it was super rigid, and if it did not meet these beats at this point, then it was a mess, or like
wasn't gonna be good.
Yeah, it wasn't gonna be good.
Yeah, it wasn't gonna work.
And maybe I didn't phrase it right in our previous episodes, because I was trying to do this and apply how you would to a YA story and coming of age hero's journey, because they're all journey, and I will talk further on this. And so I was just about ready to throw these plotting devices out the window, even though they're really good, and like for most, like every story you can find them on these beats. But again, I was adhering to it too rigidly.
Yeah. I will say, just as a side note, I did have a column for the beats.
Okay.
That was a huge thing for me, because I used the beats very, not loosely, just not insanely, but they are like my primary structure. And so I had a column for my beats so I could keep track of where I was at.
I think it's important too, but I think, like you said, keeping it loose.
Yeah.
Because I think I was like, oh, by this percentage, you should be here to this beat. And it was just making it.
Yeah. And that's like, I feel like that's something you can do in like the editing and revising process. Like with an editor, you can like give it to them and they can say, okay, let's maybe adjust and move this here. But that's got to be after you feel like you have a solid plot line that like is going to work really well with your characters, you know. It's not necessarily to get that solid plot line.
Yeah, I'd agree with that for sure. And I think part of this for me was realizing that like your beats don't have to be chapters long or long drawn out scenes. Sometimes your beat is a sentence. Yeah. It's just like a thought. It's there.
That kind of blows my mind a little.
Yeah, same. It does. But I actually found, I think it's Troy Lambert. He has a sleuth's journey instead of a hero's journey. It's like just kind of meant to break you out of looking at a hero's journey as like coming of age, but still using the hero's journey beats into a more thriller detective novel, which I'm not writing like the, what are they? Basically like the serial detective novels. You see them, you know, like your Nancy Drews, your I Miami shows, you know, where it's like beat by beat. And he kind of did apply it to this, but it can be applied to most thrillers and like mystery novels or even a mystery subplot. So look it up because it is on Plotter, available for free for people who want to steal these beats. Because it just helped me shift my perspective to these beats. Yeah. And he specifically talks about in like this YouTube process that the debate, because this is where I always struggle, is the debate your character has, that beat where they're not sure if they're going to do what they're going to do. It's sometimes the fact that like it's not your character choosing not to do it. It's external factors making it so they're unavailable too. So for example, in my story that I'm currently writing, she wants to find her sister who's missing. Cops are telling her her sister isn't considered a missing persons yet and they can't help. Her debate on moving forward isn't why her being like, well, I'm not going to go find my sister, or why she should or shouldn't go find her sister. She knows she wants to. That's her want. That's her drive. It's the cops aren't helping. I don't currently have the means to. So how do I get the means to find her? That's the little debate. And like, how do I figure it out?
Yeah, I kind of have a thought with that. I actually did use that when I've been working on my novel, because the way that I've been discovering my character, the way that she reacts to things is different than I thought. Yeah. Especially like with her personality. And so, yeah, it just depends on how your character is. And sometimes they can totally, that can fit a little better than what Save the Cat says.
Exactly. And like, again, I'm still using that beat. It's still there, but it's like a paragraph before, you know, there is kind of, it's not a full solution, but there is a solution to that beat, and it moves on. So that's kind of one way I looked at the hero's journey differently, was approaching it from like, how would a mystery play out in a hero's journey, and using those beats he had. So it was kind of then looking at what beats your villain should have, what point a new partner might come in, so like when she might have help from a side character, and we can actually post a link on our website to these resources, but just search for different genre structures of a hero's journey, and it will kind of define a hero's journey by the genre. And so that's actually something in Save the Cat I wanted to talk about that I was not utilizing, because the beats, you know, what is it, like 15?
Yeah, I think
beats.
15.
It's something like 15. Universal, depending on what genre you're writing. But I was not using the back half of Save the Cat, where they talk about the different genres. And the chapter where it actually goes on to explain what these genres are, it's called Not Your Mother's Genres, because it's 10 genres to fit any story. It's not like putting it into fantasy or horror or something like that, but it's breaking down the type of story a little bit more, if that makes sense. I don't know if you could explain that better.
Yeah, no, it's kind of cool because, like, I mean, yeah, you have your typical hero's journey story, but they're all a little different, the way that everything is formatted. Like, the one that I was digging into was The Dude with a Problem. And that's where you take an ordinary person. I'm pretty sure that's the right one. You take an ordinary person and you throw them a problem. And they have to solve it. And yeah, that's totally going to be different. It's going to be...
They're being forced into it a little bit more.
Yeah, it's like, well, they might be...
They overlap. A lot of these overlap.
Yeah,
we'll
they
just
overlap.
preface
But
that.
it's kind of cool to be able to think, okay, this applies a little differently than how I think it's supposed to apply.
Yeah.
So, have you been using that's
I mean,
helpful?
so for a different work in progress, I use Golden Fleece, which is like for heist, right? It's like you're going after an item. There is a sought after item. Because there's the Greek myth where they have to go find the Golden Fleece, right? And it's like, what elements do you need? You need a team. You need a goal, that like an item they're going after. But the one I've been using recently is Monster in the House.
And this is chapter 13
Yes.
in Save the Cat.
Yes. And it just talks about like different elements. You need a monster, which can be human or paranormal, like just monster, some villain, right? You need a house. And what it means by that is there is some sort of either physical, mental, or like emotional barrier to your characters that makes it so they will not leave this problem. They will not leave this place. So for mine, it's the fact that she is not willing to leave the city without her sister or knowing what happened to her sister, right? It's not that she's physically stuck in the city. There's nothing physically preventing her from leaving. Yeah. It's just that emotional need and want to like figure out why her sister's there. And then you also need, what was it? Monster, house. I'd have to look at it. Okay, so I couldn't remember it, but it was sin. You need a sin. So it kind of describes it as like the monster's not gonna be stalked completely innocent, or like the hero's not. The sin could even be as much as like you invaded their space type of thing. Like there's a reason behind what's going on. And so just kind of looking at those genre structures helps me look at how it might apply to a different story other than the YA hero's journey, and just kind of helped open my mind to, hey, you don't have to be super rigid with these plot points. Like they're still there and they exist. But it's not.
Yeah, they're important, and they need to be followed because, like, I mean, they've been proven to like that structure exists in like
most, if not every story.
Yeah, and so like it's you need to have them, but learning how to apply them to your story is kind of, that's what's tricky. And so that's why looking at those different genres, looking at all the options, your story might not fit what you think it should fit. It might fit better something else, which like me discovering that my character was more of like a dude with a problem was really weird for me, because I've always thought of her as like a external take action type of person, but as I've been doing a lot more research on her and like trying to discover her a little bit more, she's more of a I get hit with something and react.
Okay, rather than being proactive.
Yeah. So like it's made me change how I've applied my plot to her.
Yeah.
So
that's cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
So it kind of gives you just different perspectives.
Yeah, I would highly recommend looking at all of those as well. And then becoming familiar with the beats, because they are important, how they apply to those different stories. Because believe it or not all horror movies are monster in the house. You can find a lot of articles on stuff like that. You can also just find how hero's journey, like I said, applies to different genres. And then being open to the fact that your book might not be this like plot genre you thought it was.
Yeah, it can help if you can break out of it. It can help you see things from a different perspective.
Yeah. So my challenge to you for this episode would be to read the last few chapters of Save the Cat, or figure out like what genre of story your story falls into. Not thinking of like what genre your plot falls into, I should say. Not saying like, oh, I write horror, I write fantasy, I write romance. Just what kind of basic plot outline is it, if that makes sense. And then doing some research on the internet to find different ways of approaching these plot structures.
And definitely make sure you check us out on Instagram. Our tagline's A Writer's Survival Guide. We're also on YouTube and Facebook at How to Survive Until You're Published. And then we also have a website. It's awritersurvivalguide.com. So check us out there.
And we'll have episode links there, as well as a lot of the resources and just links to the resources that we talk about on the episode.
Yep. See you in 2 weeks.